Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to week 27 of our weekly stitch along for 2024. This week we're going to do some stitching on leaves and I posted in the YouTube community page. If you don't know what that is, if you're a subscriber and you've got notifications on, if I post there it should come up. Otherwise, if you go to my profile page, you'll see across the top where it says videos, playlists, etc. There's a tab community, and that's where us YouTubers can post just a comment or a photo or something and you can respond. So that's where I put little messages like that, you know, without making a full video. Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago we dug up our Solstice bundle books that we planted at the equinox back in March. And I wanted to do this stitching on leaves following on from that, but because I was away for a week, that's why you got the Quilt As You Go hexagon instead. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all so much for committing to that bundle book project, and it's just made my heart so glad, because that is the very heart of my practice. And it's a bit weird, I know, but that so many of you embraced it and went with it and loved it, and so many of you are taking it further. You know, I see on Instagram and in the Facebook group and here in the comments people saying that they've put more pieces in the ground to, you know, dig up at the next solstice or on a special day to them or whatever, and all the responses to what happened to your cloths, whether they disappeared completely, you know, and how you sort of took that as a positive learning experience even though it was disappointing, and how you embraced the beautiful marks that nature made on your cloth, and just everything. Just thank you so much. You can't believe how happy it made me that that you all engaged with it. And even people who in the beginning were saying to themselves, ooh, putting cloth in the ground and making it all dirty, I don't like the sound of that. But when you did it, you know, thank you. I have no words. Well, you know, I always have words, but you know what I mean. So anyway, back to this week. We're stitching on leaves. And now this Monday, today, you're getting 3 videos instead of 1, because I've made a little video showing how I wax leaves, which I thought would be a good idea to just have that as a little, it's 10 minutes, you know, short for me, standalone video, in case you just want to go and refer back to that, how to wax the leaves, and not have to watch, you know, me witter on for an hour and a half and try and find it. I'm sorry, I know there's lots of people that put timestamps. I just can't do it, so sorry about that. So anyway, so that's what I've done. I've made it as a separate video. And then there's another separate video, which is I think about 20 minutes, just of me showing you in some of my own stitch journals how I've used leaves in the past, how I've stitched them onto cloth and paper and what I've done with them and so on. So there's those 2. So I would say watch this, you know, watch and listen, but maybe this isn't a week where you can actually make the project along with me. I don't know, maybe you can. And then when you've watched this, go and watch those other 2 and go from there and decide how you want to interpret this stitching leaves project. Okay, so thank you again. Thank you. I mean, thank you for everything, but the bundle book project and how you all embraced it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go to my desk and show you my leaves and talk you through what we're going to do this week. Okay, so here I am at my desk. I will talk you through what I'm going to use, although like I said, I'm not sure it's something you could stitch along with, but you know, who knows, so I'll do it. I've got some leaves, unsurprisingly. So I've got these that I've waxed. I told you about the waxing video. These were mostly ones I picked up a few days ago and pressed and dried. To press them, I put them between kitchen paper, greaseproof paper, and then I just put some heavy books on top. If you've got a flower press, or you know, they just need to dry flat, or within books you could put kitchen paper to protect the pages of your books. You know, press them. So those are all waxed. These 2 are painted with the medium that I refer to in the video, the non-plastic artist medium. These are dried eucalyptus leaves that are at least 10 years old, that were just picked up off the ground, and I've done nothing else to them. You'll see them if you watch the video of my stitch journals, you'll see how I've stitched them. These are just dried and pressed, not waxed. So I've got a few. So I would say and I've got some ivy evergreens, which I've just pressed, and they're still quite green, but they're flat. Now this here, I've just got this to show you, so lest I forget. I did say in my community post and on social media that if you didn't have access to actual leaves, you could try houseplant leaves as well. Or if you didn't want to use actual leaves, that there'd be options. Well, this here is a bit of book page, but you could use any paper, sort of not copy paper, something a bit sturdier like sketchbook paper or something, that I drew an oak leaf on. I coloured it slightly with just a green pencil crayon and drew some, I'm not a drawing person, some veins on, you know, with a brown pencil, and then I waxed it in exactly the same way that I waxed the leaves. So I thought that was an option. If you didn't want or have access to actual leaves, you can go and find yourself, if you're not a drawing person either, if you look online you can find sort of just outlines of leaves, you know, just Google leaf drawings. And then you can either copy them or trace them or whatever on paper, colour them with something. It doesn't really matter because you're going to wax it. Experiment a bit, you know, and then you get kind of a leaf type thing made out of paper, and it will give you some of the experience of stitching a leaf rather than cloth. Now if you really don't want to do that, then obviously you can find some green cloth or, you know, or leaf coloured cloth. I couldn't find any with bigger leaf prints on. If you could find something with big leaf prints on, you could cut them out, you know, and use that as your leaf and print in the same way. Or just get some other cloth and cut out leaf shapes and then just put them on it. You're doing raw edge applique basically, but you know, don't need to give it a technical term. Cut a leaf shape out, put it on your cloth and stitch it down and do embroidery, you know, for the leaf veins and so on. So those are my non-leaf options. I did promise there would be. I would strongly recommend doing the paper thing to, you know, experience something a little bit different if you've never really stitched anything other than cloth. Okay, so I quite like that. I'm going to keep it and use it. That was on the book page, that little motif. Anyway, and it changes the structure of the paper as well. It's, yeah, waxing paper might be something else we do at one point. Okay, so I've had to narrow down what I'm going to do. Oh, the other thing I've got is a glue stick. Thank you, Helen. I do sometimes, if I'm stitching a leaf to a piece of cloth or paper, put a tiny dab of glue stick just to hold it in place, because obviously you can't pin them. Well, you can, but you make a hole that won't go away. So sometimes I just use a titchy little bit of glue stick. And I've got some threads of different kinds. And I've got this quite thick thread. This is 8-weight pearl cotton Valdani. And then I've just got my normal embroidery flosses in a couple of colours. And these are the lovely threads that I dyed when I did the onion skin dyeing video. And then I've got some, I'm going to stitch one with cloth stitched to the leaf, and then I'm going to stitch 1 or 2 leaves to cloth. So I've got some little bits of cloth. An ideal cloth is sturdy cloth. So this is a bit of woolly blanket that was dyed with red onion skins and iron. So it's a bit thicker. So if you had a flannel or, you know, something like that. That is some brown onion skin dyed silk noil. So something like that, which is a bit flimsier, I could layer up with this tea dyed linen. So I could put that on there like that, and then I could, you know, do a leaf on top and make a little layered collage effect. And then that, it looks nice, but also it gives the leaf some structure behind it. So if you put it straight away on a piece of silk chiffon, for example, this again was from the onion skin dyeing, like that, this silk chiffon is very pliable, and then the leaf, if it's going to crack, it will. I'll talk more as I go along about if they crack or not, and you know, how that makes me feel. And I've got here just some scraps of linen, again, just to use as, you know, if I want it for backgrounds. Pardon me. And the other thing I've got are some bits of paper. Now, of course, I've got eco print paper. I will do a video soon. I know I keep promising. I just need to get round to it. It needs to not be raining, not be windy, so I can do it outside. So I've got some scraps of eco print paper. If you don't have eco print paper, you could have tea dyed paper. This is some paper that I did just with tea and I think rust. You know, the tea and rust dyeing video I did a little while ago, if you've seen that. More eco print. Now this is tea bag paper, and this is actually tea bag paper that somebody gave me. It was never round a tea bag. But if you drink tea and you save your tea bags, I've got a whole tin full somewhere, but I could not find them. You can dry your tea bags, get the tea out, open up the tea bag. You can wax those as well, by the way, in the same way that I wax the leaves and the paper. And then you can use those as a surface to stitch your leaves to. And that's just a really nice thing to use as well. So that's where I got that out. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do stitch some cloth to a leaf. I'm going to stitch a leaf to some paper, and I'm going to stitch a leaf to some cloth. So that'll give me 3 little pieces to put in my journal. Right, so let's get going. What should we do first? This is why I take so long making decisions. Let's stitch something to a leaf. Let's try one of these. Eucas, precious eucas. If you haven't got eucalyptus leaves, you know, if you're down under, then you will have, and they're great. You could get an ivy leaf or a vine. You know those vines that go up trees, liana. That's liana. You see there, I cut a hole just to make sure it accepted it. So I'm going to cut a hole. Now I would say if you have a very precious, beautiful leaf that you love, like that, get another one from the same source and experiment on that with cutting your hole. And there are some ivy leaves, those would also work, but anything sort of evergreen, a houseplant leaf, and so on. Oh, before I go any further, let me just talk about this because it's important. I think it's very important to know what plant materials you're messing with. Just because they're natural doesn't mean they're safe. I'm sure you all know that. I know pretty well my deciduous trees where I live, but if you transplanted me to somewhere where you may live, I wouldn't know one from another. There's a free app that you can get on your smartphone. The name's going to come up on the screen now, called Flora Incognita. And what you can, it's free, you download it to your smartphone, and then you take a picture of a plant, and it could be the leaf, the flower, the bark, the stem, or whatever, and it will tell you what plant it is, and it will give you all kinds of information about it, which is of course interesting, but importantly it will tell you if it's toxic or not. Now things can be toxic if you eat them, obviously don't eat them. Things can be toxic to your skin, poison ivy, I'm sure you all know that in the States. Euphorbia sap can irritate your skin and so on. And things, you know, things can make your skin light sensitive. It's chemicals. All leaves are chemicals. Everything's chemicals. Don't assume that it's safe. That can also apply to houseplants, by the way. So I highly recommend, if you're not someone who knows your plants, get Flora Incognita, download it onto your smartphone and use that, you know, if you don't have a book or whatever. I mean, I have books as well. It's just great. I'm out in the woods. Sometimes I see a little plant growing, you know, in the understory, and I take a quick picture of it and it tells me what it is, and you can keep lists of what you found where. It's great, you know, it's wonderful. Flora Incognita. Okay, so that being said, none of these are going to hurt me. I'm going to, well, the ivy, if I ate it, wouldn't do me much good, but I won't. I'm going to make a hole in this yucca, and I'm going to use my old blunty fiskers. I'm not going to use my new snippies. You could also put it down on a cutting mat and do it with a craft knife, but I'm going to try with scissors because you might not all have cutting mats and craft knives. And these are my last 2 precious yuccas. Well, I've got loads in journals, but you know. So here we go. I'm going to start by just making, am I in the middle? I'm going to not go too near the edge because it might splinter out. Now this leaf, like I said, is 10 years old, it's bone dry. And I'm going to just sort of make little perforation holes in a vaguely circular shape. I'm away from the midrib. I mean, yuccas have a kind of midrib, but they're not structured like other leaves. And I'm just going to keep going around like that, almost chipping away at it now. I've got my my several layers of cloth underneath. You know, you want to do it on something with a bit of give. A cutting mat would also probably work. Don't do it on your best dining room table. And I'm basically perforating it. If you had a big hole punch, you know, not just the normal ones that we use to put holes in paper to go in ring binders, journalers have bigger circle punches, you know. You could try using that. I've never done that, it just occurred to me. If you've got one, try it and report back. Now here, where the midribs are, it won't perforate. And I'm just working away at it. Paying attention, you know, pay attention and be prepared for them to break and not work. That's going to happen. I'm hoping it won't happen here because I've only got one spare. And I really wanted to show you. And I think that's everything now apart from the veins. And then with the scissors I'm just going to snip. I'm just poking them in and snipping. And the trick with anything that's brittle is not to bend it. That's maybe sounding obvious, but sorry, I'm concentrating, so I stopped talking. There we go. So now I've got a little hole. Now it's a little bit rough around the edges. If you had a teeny tiny nail file, which I realise I have now got over there in my new DMC box, you could very carefully go around with a nail file or a tiny bit of sandpaper, or, you know, I'm just going to neaten it up a bit with the scissors. It doesn't have to be super neat because I'm going to cover it all with thread. But I just don't want to snag my thread. There we go. Now I've got yucca crumbs all over my... So there we go. So now I've got a little hole in my yucca leaf. So the next thing I want to do is decide which side I want us up. And I want this side. And I'm going to stick a little bit of cloth behind it. I'd really wanted to use this, but it's that sari that you've seen me use before, but it's very, very thin. And I'm wondering, oh, let's just go for it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I'm going to cut a little square that's bigger than my hole by about 1/4 of an inch or so. Put it behind. Yes, see, it covers, I don't know if you can see, but it's bigger than my hole by about 1/4 of an inch. And now I'm going to take my little glue stick, thank you Helen. Snippy snippy fiskers, we say thank you Sue. Glue stick, we say thank you Helen. It's got fred hair on it, of course it has. And I'm going to just put some glue just around the edge of the back of the hole. Only a tiny weeny bit. Put the lid back on so it doesn't dry up. And just stick my bit of cloth over it. And press it down. And if you were journal making or whatever, you could just leave it like that, you know, if you wanted to. It's pretty, it's already pretty. But I'm going to stitch it. And I think I'm going to stitch it with some of this onion dyed silk. Now I use you want an optimum thickness of needle. So you don't want a great big fat needle because it will poke big holes that the thread won't fill. But you don't want a skinny, you know, a needle that's too fine because it won't make a big enough hole for the thread to go through, and then that might cause you problems. If you were using embroidery floss, I would use 2 strands, no more, on a leaf like this. But again, it's experimenting, and if you've got your spare experimenting leaf next to you, and you know, from your precious leaf that you are a bit worried about damaging, then experiment with needles and threads and everything on that before you commit to your you know, your actual leaf. I've taken a lazy girl thread, of course I have. I'm going to make a knot. Now, the thing with stitching leaves and paper, for that matter, is once you make a hole, it won't close up again. So you can't poke about like you can in cloth until you get it right. So what I do with both leaves and paper is make a hole. I want to come through from the back with my knot, but I want to make a guide hole first. My glue must be dry by now. So I'm going to stay a good 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of my hole, and I'm going to poke a little hole. Not through my finger. Do you see? Do you see? See my needle coming out? And then I'm going to go to the back and go in that hole through to the right side, like so. And then I'm on the right side, so I'm going to go down into my cloth. I'm holding my finger behind, not where my needle's going, but just so that I don't push the cloth away, off, you know what I mean? Because it's held by the glue stick, but it sometimes happens that the cloth got pushed away. So there's my first stitch. And then I need to come up somewhere further round. I don't need to really worry about tension like I would if I was eyelet stitching in cloth, so I can go nearly next to it. And again, make a guide hole from the front to the back, and then turn it over and go through that hole from the back. Now this is a process that I like. I like stitching paper. There'll be more of that coming at one point. It's a completely different way of stitching to, you know, stitching on a stitch meditation scroll or something. You like it or you won't, you know, you just have to try it. So I'm now on the back, so I need my guide hole from the front, and then go to the back and come through. I'm not pulling, whoops, I don't want you with me. Let's just move these out of the way because it's also a bit messy for you to look at. Let's move those all to one side. Or maybe you can see better as well. And I can't remember what I was saying. What was I saying? You also want to be careful not to get knots and tangles. That's why I should not have had a lazy girl thread. So now I'm on the back, so I need to make my guide hole from the front. But it's equally, I think that's what I was saying about the stitching. It's equally meditative, but in a different way. I can't see my hole now. Where's my hole gone? The sari silk's healing up very quickly. If you can't see a hole, what I'd then do is put the needle back through from the front, look on the back where it's coming out, put my fingernail there, and then get my needle out, come back round, and then there's my hole. Like that. Yes, don't get knots, because there it wanted to tangle, because it's been wound round a lolly stick. Because you can't, you know, it's hard to pull at it in the same way that you can pull a cloth. It's a delicate thing, you just have to embrace that and go with it and be patient and be prepared for it to break, you know. So that's a little bit why I wanted to do it in the same, following on from the eco bundles, because there's, apart from the fact that it's leaves and nature, lost my hole again. Normally I'd have it sort of touching my nose so I could see, but then you wouldn't be able to see. Yeah, what was I saying? Meditative, was I? You have to, because it's the letting go, you know, you don't have the same control that you have when it's cloth. It's not designed to be stitched. It didn't, you know. Its reason for being is not for us to come along and pick it up off the ground and then start stitching it. It's a leaf, it's there to photosynthesize and feed the tree and so on, and be a part of nature. So you have to kind of respect that we're doing something with it that, not that we shouldn't be doing, but you know what I'm saying, don't you? You know what I'm saying. Just be prepared for it to break. And sometimes they break and crack, and I like them more. Also what I'm observing here is this sari silk, because there's just one little piece of sari silk, thin, is I can't do the stitching any closer together than that, because the sari silk also will probably, you know, the holes will join up and then it will fall out obviously at one point. So if you've never stitched paper or leaves or anything, please try it. I know you will, most of you, because I was, like I said, very gratified by how you embraced the bundle book project. My son said a while ago, when I told him about you all, that I was making you all as weird as I am. if you're not already as weird as I am. But hey, who says what's weird? So I'm just working my way round. Yeah, it's a matter of, you know, there are things that some people would think were normal that I think are weird, and vice versa. So, as you can see, it's quite a different process to what I normally do, which is running stitching on a bit of fabric or cloth collage. Now here's the mid-rib, so I'm not going to try and stitch through that, I'm going to go behind it here, because in front of it would be too close to the edge. If you get too close to the edge, obviously it's more likely to crack. And so you have to make adjustments again, because it's a leaf and not a bit of cloth that's the same everywhere. Instead of listen to the cloth, we're listening to the leaf. And we're we're doing our best to make it look nice and how we want it and not break, and you know, by putting the wax on and drying them and pressing them, we're doing our best. But at the same point we have to accept that it might not always go how we want it to go, because there are things outside of our control, and that to me is has been a very important lesson to learn, and not only in my stitching work but in life in general, if we want to get deep and philosophical. And of course, if I did a great big eyelet stitch on a leaf and I spent maybe an hour stitching it, and then my last stitch it broke, of course I would be disappointed. But I would then try and find a way to salvage that in some way, or I would just put it in whatever project it was going in, broken, and just view that as part of its story. I think I can squeeze one more stitch in between here now. I can find the hole. I'm being naughty and poking around. You see, that's me being impatient. Go back to the front, put your needle in, see where the hole is. If I didn't have the cloth there, if I was just doing this, you could equally just do it around a hole in the leaf. You don't have to put the cloth behind. Then seeing the hole would be easy, because leaves don't close up again. It's just because of the sari silk. Whoops. There we go. And there is my little eyelet stitched eucalyptus leaf. Isn't that pretty? So now I'm going to go round to the back with my thread, and I'm just going to go through a couple of the stitches, 3 in fact. And I'm not pulling at it, I'm being gentle. And then I'm going to go back, not through the same one again, because obviously it will come out. I'm just going to go back through the first 2 stitches. You could also put a little bit of tape or something if you wanted, but I find that anchors it well enough. And snip it off. Whoops. With the unsnippy. See how they did not snip? I don't dare have the other ones out, because I know I'll pick them up and start cutting a leaf with them. And that's not what I want to do. So there's leaf 1, eyelet stitched, a euca leaf. Just admire it for a moment. So I'll set that to one side. Leaf, the next one I'm going to do, let me get my little pile in here. I like this one. This is a hazel leaf. I've just picked it up off the ground this morning. It wasn't fully dry. I have waxed it. And if you kind of experimentally go like this, not too roughly, it is a bit bendy. Although it was dry when I picked it up, the wax just kind of gives it a little coating. So I think I'm going to use that one next. And I save all these. I have old sweetie tins, and I just, you know, save them for whenever. So how am I going to display this little baby? Maybe on some paper. It's quite nice on there. I'm not thinking at this moment how I'm going to fit them in my journal. I'm going to worry about that later. How about if I put a bit of silk chiffon behind there? How would that look? and stitch the whole 3 together. So I don't think that colour's quite right with that. I think it sort of loses it a bit. I need some more contrast. That's the same thing. Do you see how it deadens it straight away? It pops much more on the... I don't really like that word, pop. Stop saying about words you don't like, because people get upset, Catherine, when they do like the word. It shows up better on that tea dye. That's also going to, yeah, lose it. Maybe I'll just leave it like that on the tea dye. Now, how about some of this? That's nearly the same colour, but yeah, let's do that. So I want to tear that down a bit. So we're really into mixed media here. Obviously, if you're making scrolls, they'll need to be able to roll, so try that. If you're making one huge scroll for the whole year, by now your scroll will be quite thick, so it won't have to roll very far. Probably it will be fine. If you're making a quilt or something of that kind, then obviously putting real leaves on, or even paper leaves, is probably not the best idea. But maybe have a go, and they make lovely gift cards, apart from anything else, apart from all the other lovely things you can do with them. So you could just have a go and make them, make a real leaf one or a paper leaf one. You imagine you do that and you do that and you put it on a card. How lovely would that be? So I'm just trimming my bit of linen so it's slightly smaller than the paper. And getting the fluffy edges nice. Yeah, so this was just tea dyed. Tea dyed. Literally dipped in tea. There we go. So I think I'm going to just stitch the cloth to the paper for starters. I'll use this since it's in my needle. And again, I might just do it, put a tiny bit of glue, just the merest. It's not holding it there for any length of time, it's just so it doesn't shift about when I'm stitching. And if you do use glue stick, it's best to then let it dry before you stitch, which should happen pretty quickly here today because it's quite warm, although it's cloudy. Oops, sorry, I made you wobble. Now some paper, if it's sturdy, thick paper, I'll do it in the same way as I showed you with the eucalyptus leaf, sorry, get my words out. But some paper, this is just sketchbook paper, and again, experiment on a scrap. I think I can get away with just running stitching. And do you see how I pulled my thread? I'll do it again. If you are knitting or crocheting or stitching on something, if you look up, look up. Right, see my needle's in the cloth and the paper. I'm not going to pull it this way because that could tear the paper. I pull it the way it's going, like that. Do you see? So again, it's a different material to cloth. I think paper is closer to cloth than I used to think. That's why I like paper journals for stitch journals, and not only cloth journals. But you have to be aware of its qualities and, treat it with a bit of respect. And the glue's still wet because I can feel it sticky, but So I'm just going to do a running stitch all the way around the edge of here. Come on. When I can get my needle through. There we go. Oh, I know why. Because it was out of the scraps, and on the back is some, that polyfiller. Polyfiller's the brand in the UK. I don't know if it is elsewhere. There's a bit there, and there's a bit there. That you use for filling holes in the walls. Well, there was some left over from when we were renovating, and I was experimenting with it on bits of paper and bits of lace and things like that. So my needle hit it, as you do. Yeah, I pushed it through a stencil onto paper. It was really nice. I know you can buy, if you're a journaler, you can buy proper, they call it modelling paste or something like that. But we had this leftover stuff that was drying out in the barn. So use that instead. So it takes a little bit more time, but we're not in a hurry. And like I said, again, it's just paying attention, and that's the mindfulness of it as well as making sure you have the best possible outcome, seeing what you do and how the materials respond, and then making adjustments accordingly. This is probably rather boring watching me do this. But, you know, so I mean, feel free to do exactly what I do with whatever leaves you've got, of course, as always, but I'm very much looking forward to different interpretations as well, if some of you have your own ideas. Just combining, I mean, what we're doing here is mixed media, isn't it? We are now officially mixed media artists. Yay for us! Yay for us! The other thing you can do if you've got really, really fragile leaves, or leaf skeletons, you know, if you're lucky enough to find leaf skeletons, is put them on with a very, very light smear of glue, and then put something very, very fine over the top, like a bit of super fine silk chiffon, or some net, you know, something meshy, so that you can see the leaf through. And then stitch not through the leaf but around the edge of the leaf. You just outline the shape of the leaf. I did that in one of my book bundles for my forager's journal. I made a long scroll and I trapped chestnut leaves. I really wished I hadn't chosen this paper with polyfiller on the back of it. And I trapped chestnut leaves between the layers, and I stitched not through the leaves but around the edges of the leaves. And I buried it in the woods for, you know, 3 months or whatever it was. And then most of the leaves crumbled away, but the stitching was left. And that's something else you can think of when you're using leaves in your stitching, that it's not about preserving the leaf necessarily, but preserving the memory of the leaf. It's kind of an eco-printing in a way, isn't it? So if I was to put a... Come on, there we go. Put a really... fragile old dried up leaf onto a piece of cloth and stitch through it, excuse me, and the leaf crumbles away, the stitching will remain. So it's kind of an eco-print, if you know what I mean. Right, so I'm just going to go back through my previous stitch, pull it up, and make a little loopy knot thing. Again, you could also just put a bit of masking tape or something over the thread on the back. There we go. So that's my little mount for this little baby. I'm going to get something finer. First of all, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue in the middle of it, just the tiniest bit. It won't stick very well because it's wax, but it's only to hold it instead of a pin. It won't stick at all because of the wax. Oh no, it has. It's stuck a bit. Right, I'm going to get some... What about the red? Is that really... I'm always torn between wanting you all to be able to see and wanting me to find it aesthetically pleasing. I'm going to go with this gold. They're already cut into lengths. So hopefully you can see this gold. I'm going to use one strand, I think. I think I could get away with 2. But I'm going to use 1 if I can get a strand off. Now my thread's got tangled because I was in a rush with it. There we go. So it's just one strand of DMC type, and then which needle shall I use? Like this. This is a tulip size 9, so just the finest needle that you can get your thread through. Probably even a size 10 if I had one would be okay. make a knot. I'm just going to stitch this on with a kind of overcast stitch. My knot is probably not going to stay. I'm going to come through between my cloth and my paper. Bits of glue on there. I was a bit liberal with the glue stick. So I'm going to come through between my cloth and my paper. You see what I'm doing? Only because then I'm hoping that my knot will hold. If it doesn't, if I feel it's going to pop through, I'll just take a tiny stitch on the surface of the cloth. If I was just in paper, then I'd either have to make a bigger knot, or another thing I sometimes do is just leave a long tail, stitch round, and then when I come back to the end, I tie my two tails together on the back. Or you can do the trick with a bit of masking tape. Is it going to stay? I'm just going to do another little stitch just through the cloth just to hold it still. Again, it's about listening to the materials. So now I'm going to come over onto the leaf in about, can you see what I'm doing? I'm going to come in about 3/16 of an inch, but it can be anything, you know, you could come right in here if you liked the idea of big stitches. Now here it's cracking already, so I'm going to kind of stitch over that and past it, more like 1/4 of an inch actually, to sort of try and mend that piece as I go. Again, accepting that it might not work and it might crumble and fall off. And now I'm not going to do guide holes because I'm not that worried about how even it looks. I'm going to come through from the back, and it's sturdy with all the layers, and go down in the front. And I'm just going to accept wherever I come up is where my stitch is going to be. And being careful as well that your thread doesn't get caught around the stalk and things. And I'm coming up every time into the leaf and going down off the edge, only because then I'm sure I do want my stitches to be right on the edge of the leaf. So I don't want to be poking around, you know, and making holes and not coming up in the right place. You see I've gone further away from the edge. It's just what's happening apparently. I think I might try and come a bit further back in. I like to not try and be perfect. It was the same when I was doing free machine quilting. If you start off making something and from the beginning you're so focused on it being perfect, and then at one point you make a mistake, in inverted commas, you do something differently, it will upset you and it will stand out and so on. And you might have to, you know, unpick or cover up or things like that. If you do things, not to say deliberately imperfect, but you know, uneven or wonky. Wonky's our mot de, not even mot de jour, because we use it all the time, or I do. Mot de vie, a word of life. I quite like that. It's like eau de vie, which is French liquor. You know, liqueur, alcohol. Anyway, our mot de vie, our word for life, is wonky. So if you start with the intention of all the stitches being a different length, then all the stitches are different lengths. If you start with the intention of all the stitches being exactly the same length, and one slightly longer or shorter, then it doesn't look good. But if they're all longer and shorter, then it always looks good, I think. Obviously that's personal choice. Some people like everything to be the same. That's just what they find visually pleasing. And that's fine too. And it's, I just love, I need to do this more often. I mean, I do it quite often, but I need to do it more often. It's just, I just love the feeling of, you know, here I've got the leaf, the cloth, the paper and the thread, the three things together. Probably not enough thread. And I'll show you the back when I'm done, because that also looks interesting. You can do more exciting things like this. I just like this kind of simple thing, in the same way that when I'm doing my cloth collage, see I've made a hole and it's crumbled. Do you see I've come up out of the hole? So what I could do there is just embrace that. That's happened. Blow off the little, that's quite fragile all along there. So, you know, if you want to break, break. I'm going to blow a little bits away. I could then decide, that's quite fragile there as well, to do a kind of rudimentary mend around that hole, or I could have gone over it with like a darn type stitch or just a cross stitch. So instead of going, oh no, my leaf broke, I have to, you know, throw it away and start again, and I've wasted all that time and effort and thread. You know, well, if you want to break, well, it's breaking down there as well. Just, you know, be engaged, find a way to respond. I talked recently about the conversation between you and the piece you're working on. And again, it's that letting go of expectations thing. Now I'm coming up here, I'm going to go onto the outside again. And now I am going to come up somewhere around here. The other thing I'm doing is I'm holding my finger there. I'm not pressing hard with my nail because then I might crack it. Just again to stop that the needle pushes everything up as you come through. See, I have to also pay attention to what I'm doing so that I can tell you, because a lot of it I just do because of, you know, because I've done it before. But I have to remember to tell you. It's like, it's what my mother said when my mother taught me to drive. Well, I had, you know, proper paid lessons as well, but in those days in England you could go driving with someone sat next to you who had passed their test themselves. I'm not sure if you still can in England. In France you can't do that. Well, you can, but yeah, not usually. Anyway, yeah, my mother, and I remember my mother saying, well, you know, I can drive. I've been driving for 40 years or whatever it was at that point. No, it wouldn't have been that long. But anyway, however long she'd been driving. But I have to think how to explain to you how to drive. And that is one of the things I love about teaching. I mean, I love teaching because I just love engaging with people and hopefully trying to inspire them, to quote my son, to be as weird as I am. But also it's because of the way it makes me think, you know. When I've been teaching workshops in the past and I've had people in the group who were not wired up the same way that I am, let's put it like that, and, you know, you explain something to a group of 15 and 14 people understand you and one doesn't because they understand in a different way. It's absolutely not that they're, you know, less bright or less smart or less quick on the ball or whatever. It's just that they understand in a different way. And then you as a teacher have to find a way. And in the beginning, when I was, you know, nervous and not experienced and so on, and I'd explain and 14 heads would nod and one person would look quizzical, you'd have sort of a little bit of internal panic and, oh no, and, you know, I need to make sure this lady understands and how can I do that, and so on. But after a while I used to look for those people and hope there was at least one in the class, because of the way they made me think about my own work. If you're teachers yourselves, maybe you understand what I'm talking about. And another thing that I began to observe as I tried to make a knot in this too small piece of thread is that the people in the beginning often, not always, but often, the people in the beginning who had that kind of air about them as to, why on earth did I book myself on this workshop? This isn't me at all. I'm not going to like it. I'm not going to enjoy it. Oh gosh, you know, I've wasted my money, I've wasted my day. They were the ones, often, that loved it and produced the most inventive work and so on and so on. And so again, in the beginning when I had those people in workshops, oh no, this lady's not enjoying it and she's paid me and, you know, I've failed as a teacher and so on and so on. But then I began to get confident that by the end of the day, more often than not, I had one or two who I just couldn't reach. But more often than not, those people really became, you know, not the star pupils, because they're all star pupils, but very rewarding to me as a teacher. I know quite a few of you are teachers. You've mentioned in the comments before, here and there. about teaching. So I think that probably will resonate with some of you. But it's, for me, that was such a big thing that it makes me, makes me stab myself with a bit of dried leaf. It makes you as a teacher think about your process and really understand your process when you have to explain it to somebody else. It's such a learning thing for the teacher as well. Right, I've come through between my cloth and my paper again. I think my knot will hold. I'm going to just go for it. And I'm nearly back to the beginning of my little hazel leaf. Another thing I wanted to say about this leaf as well is that's just me again. That's a personal preference, but I love looking for the imperfect leaves. You know, so if I'm looking on the ground for an oak leaf, I won't necessarily be attracted to the one that's pristine and perfect and not damaged in any way. I like the ones that are wonky, I suppose, a bit misshapen, you know, cracked, damaged. I just find them more interesting to look at. And I think as well that it's as if they've got more of a story to tell because something's happened to them that hasn't happened to their neighbours or their tree mates. Right, I'm back to the beginning where there's this little bit that's wanting to crack. So I'm going to put a stitch right over the middle of it. So I'm trying to mend it. Excuse me, if my mend fails and it falls away at one point, so be it. I think I'm going to make a cross even. So I'm going to come through over here somewhere. Excuse me, sorry, and go back down over there to make a kind of cross. So it's visible mending. So there we go. So now I have to do my thing on the back. So you see on the back, because I was going up through the leaf all the time, I've got this lovely shape of a backstory. And my polyfiller was also part of the story. I just make my loopy knot thing and snip that off. So that's 2 little tableaus, 1, 2. So now I'm going to do one on some cloth, just on cloth, I think. I'm very tempted to use an unwaxed one, just to show you that it is possible if you don't want to wax, because this was waxed, this was dried, but an evergreen, a eucalyptus, yucca. Those wild cherries that are done with that medium are also nice there. There's choices again, we're back to choices, always choices. How about this little, this is a little chestnut leaf that I picked up off the ground this morning, so it's quite dry. You know, it's on the turn, but it's still a bit pliable. I think I'm going to give that a go. I'm staying in that palette though, aren't I? I'm not green. Oh, I had this one as well. Maybe I'll do this. This is last year's oak, and I picked it up. I didn't make that hole was already in it, and that's what I mean about the imperfect. That just cries out to have an eyelet. Maybe I'll do that one. Although it has been waxed. Oh well, never mind. And maybe baby, I wanted to use my bit of wool, but it'll stick over the edge, but do I mind? That will of course make the edges vulnerable, but it's going in a journal. You're now just hearing my brain whirring. I liked this chiffon as well there. If I do that, put something, got this is polyester, but it's a nice colour. Maybe I'll do that. I'm going to cut some of that polyester all the day. I'm choosing this little abstracty, splodgy, flowery bit because it's got an orange. You can see it's mostly yellow, but it's got like an orange centre. This is, if I put this in my journal, it's going to be super thick. I might not put them all in my journal, I might just choose one. The others will of course get included somewhere else. I'll put it there like that. Obviously I need to trim some more of that cloth away. Maybe I don't want it on that green. Maybe I'm just wanting to use that green too much. It will find its place somewhere else. No, I don't like it on there either. Let's use the green. I could, of course, get up and go over there and find another piece. Maybe I should do that. Oh, there's that piece. How about this brown? Oh, I think it's nicer on the brown. I like layering, and I like layering things so that the edges show, because I just like it. It's just visually more interesting to me. That could do with an iron, of course. Oh yeah, if you go and watch the leaf waxing video, you'll see me using an iron. Not to iron anything, just to melt wax. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. So I have to cut that there somewhere. And also, it's nice to not be worrying about my journal, or not worrying about my journal, but to be thinking, not thinking about, oh, it has to be a certain size to fit in my journal. That can be a reassuring thing, a reassurement. No, that's not a word. Oh, what's the noun for reassuring? Ouch. I'm going to pull that because it hurt my finger. It can be reassuring to have a boundary, but at the same time it can also be restricting. I will, going forward, if you go and watch the video where I show you my journals, you'll see some of them are not just simple pages all the same size. Some are much more complex than that, and they get much fatter because of it. You know, they have flip outs and that kind of thing. But I like that. I think I'm going to do it somewhat like that, because then it's more or less protected by the... Am I still in frame? I can't see. Yeah. More or less protected by the you know, linen. But I want this polyester now? No, you see, now I just think it's not natural. It isn't natural. Maybe some onion skin dyed stuff instead. Not enough contrast. Oh dear, dear, dear. Let's go back to the chiffon. No, not enough contrast either. Maybe I'll just leave it like that then. If I can't find anything that's right, then apparently it doesn't want anything. Just one last try with this greeny shiny. Greeny shiny. Oh yes, I'm gonna use that because it's the same colour-ish, but it's completely different material, and it's polyester, plastic. But I think that has something to say as well with the fragility of the biodegradable leaf. Even though I've waxed it, it will still biodegrade, and the polyester, which will take 500 years. So if you think forward 500 years, all this will be long gone, but a bit of polyester will still be there. I need to be careful here because I don't want it poking out. So I'm going to cut a bit with my blunties. And we're going to do this. Can I? See, it's so thin there. Yeah, if I just cut that end off, that should be fine. I've just got my thumb where I think I need to cut. I think I can strategically position that. So I'm going to do the same thing on the back with my lovely glue stick from Lovely Helen. I'm going to put it on the back of this because it's light and then I can see. So I just want it around the very edge, especially there. I might even do it with my finger, which means I'm going to get a gluey finger. It's really just there where it's super thin. And again, it's only to hold it until I stitch, so there we go. Wipe my gluey fingers on my hands. Spread it around till it disappears. Right, get you back in. I could, of course, baste that to that first. Shall I do that? Yeah, I'm going to stick this on there first before it dries. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm obviously just positioning it so that it covers the hole but it doesn't stick out past the edge. There, that's quite cool. Can you see? Can you see? Look up, I'm showing you something. It's quite cool that it's the same colour. It's even got a similar sheen, but not exactly. But it's a different material. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this to this. I'm going to have it that way up. I'm keeping all those fluffies. I'm just going to stitch. Shall I do it with this? Yeah, why not? I'm just going to do running stitch because I like it as good as anything. You can do something fancy if you want to. Whoops, of course. Quite big running stitches, taking 2 stitches at a time. Not something I often do. It's a completely different feeling stitching 2 layers of cloth with 1 strand of floss when I'm usually stitching with 2 strands of floss, usually but not always. While I'm just going around here, I just want to give a little plug to this week's Wednesday video. I'm going slightly away, a long way away from log cabins. Nothing to do with log cabins at all, because there's something I want to do. A bee in my bonnet. And I'm just telling you in case you don't watch the Wednesdays because you're not interested in the piecing and, you know, all the stuff we usually do. I'm going to share a way of doing a kind of applique of a circle, because Jerry Bellini, hello Jerry, recently did a lovely video for her dot series about how to properly do needle turn applique properly, which is brilliant and wonderful, and you know, she's wonderful at it, and I highly recommend you going to watch that video if you don't know how to do proper needle turn applique. But it reminded me that years and years ago I made a Baltimore album quilt. Well, that's not true. I started to make a Baltimore album quilt, king size, and I ended up, I think, with 5 cushions. They were 12-inch blocks, a block a month thing from a magazine, I think. All needle turn applique, and I really wanted the finished quilt, so I thought, well, I'll make it. But after I'd done 5, I had had enough, so I just made 5 cushions. I think they were 12-inch blocks. Did I mention that? And my mother's got some. There aren't any here, or I would have shown you. But I think my mother's got all of them probably. So more her thing than mine. More grunge really than pretty. Anyway, an element in those Baltimore album blocks was a perfect needle turn circle, and I just couldn't do it well enough. These days I would do it raw edge, you know, to get a clean edge, because although I embrace the wonky and all that, if it's supposed to be a circle, I want it to be a circle. So anyway, I came up with, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's come up with it, a different way of doing it. So I just thought, as a compliment to Jerry's excellent video, I would do that. And while I was thinking about doing that, I was going through a basket that I hadn't looked in for a while, and there I found a project I started but didn't finish, of 4 patches with this kind of, you know, person who's rubbish at needle turns applique method circles on. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do on Wednesday. So if you think that would be interesting, that's why I'm just giving you the heads up, as they say. Right, there we go. So ready for my leaf. I'll put that in the aughts because that's too small now. So I'm just going to what? I don't know yet. I don't want to go around the edge again because I've done that. Maybe, baby, I'll just go up the spine. And I was thinking of stitching around that hole when I picked the leaf up with the hole, but I don't want to now because I like the way it's almost seamless. So at a glance you think it's just a whole leaf, but then you suddenly notice that it's not quite. Have I glued it enough to get away with not stitching? I think so. So I think I'm going to just couch up the spine in red. Shall I do it in red? Shall I go mad? Don't know. Yes, I will, because it's a red oak. Or here in France they call them chêne américain, which means American oak. But those are ones with the big pointy leaves. We don't actually have any in our woods growing. This came from on the edge of a neighbour's land where I was, well, not trespassing because I have permission, but not on my own land. So I'm going to try with 2 strands of floss in a tulip size 9. Yes, I can thread it, which is smaller than my usual 8. I buy those mixed tubes, well, I have had one in my life and I'm still using the needles. A mixed tube of tulip embroidery needles, long eye, sharps, and you get 7s, 8s and 9s. So the 9 is the smallest you get and the 7 is the biggest. And for my purposes, they you know, nearly everything I do, they're fine. I'm going to just put some more dabs of glue just to hold it. Probably if I was doing this on my own I wouldn't be gluing so much, because I'd have it on my knee and I'd just hold it and have it pressed up against my nose so I could see. But if I did that you wouldn't be able to see, so that's why I'm using more glue, but you know, go for it, it's fine. Okay, so I think I'm going to turn it round and start where the stem is, and you can sort of bend it where you want if you want, but be careful not to break it. Bend it, don't break it. I think I'm going to go all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to hope my knot holds. Yes, it does. This first bit will be easy, as she said, struggling. So I'm just putting it into place with literally with the stitch. I'll turn it sideways actually. And now I'm going to just couch along the stem. Couching, if you don't know, if you're new here, because we have done it already. Let's see, it's not stuck at all, but it'll be alright. Is when you stitch something down to something else without stitching through the thing you're stitching down, if that makes sense. And this is just a straightforward couching stitch, but you can also couch using any other kind of stitch that you want. It's just the definition of it is that you don't stitch through the actual thing. So at this point oh no, now I've gone the wrong way because I'm not paying attention. I'll have to pull that back and rethread. So at this point I'm couching. In a minute I'm going to, I said couch down the midrib. Well, now we can get pedantic and say you're not couching anymore, Catherine, because you'll be sewing through the leaf. Yes, that's true, but I didn't say I was going to couch the leaf down. I said I was going to couch the midrib down. I'm not sewing through the midrib. Sorry. I'm like having a pedantic philosophical discussion with myself. Anyway, so go over. And I'll try and keep myself out of the way as much as I can, but I do need to hold it and hold it carefully because it's quite big. So now I can go once more into the cloth. I hope you can see. I'm not going into the leaf yet. I'm going to make a bigger stitch because if I tried to go there into the leaf, I'm too close to the edge. And now I'm coming up through the leaf. And again, I'm not going to try and get all these even because that's just setting myself up for disappointment. I'm coming up where I'm coming up. I can't make the guide hole thing because the cloth on the back will just close up straight away. And I really don't mind if it's a bit organic. Finally, I used the O word in a video about organic materials. So I hope I've given you enough ideas. Like I said at the beginning, if you want to just, you know, if you're very new to this kind of thing and it's more comfortable for you to just imitate what I've done exactly, then of course that is absolutely fine. But equally, if you think, oh, that's given me ideas to take it off in a different direction myself, then that's also fine. And if you don't want to use leaves, do try the paper. I mean, you don't even have to wax it. You could just cut leaves out of paper and experiment with attaching paper to cloth. It will give you a similar, you know, feeling. It's a different material. Ooh, don't get a knot. You could experiment with different kinds of paper, you know, if it said, ooh, I nearly made a hole where I didn't want a hole. If you do mixed media, if you've got all different kinds of papers, hello Machtelt, I'm especially thinking about you. And you'll be very experienced with stitching. Machtelt has a channel called Daily Dose of Paper. And Lisbeth as well, I'm also thinking of. Hello Lisbeth in Denmark, her channel is called Dragenkunst. Both mixed media artists who stitch as well. Oops. Now see what's going to happen. I've caught my thread on my leaf. Because it's a really lovely thing to do, combine, if you're a mixed media artist, to put stitching into it. I mean, I was a stitcher first, and I do a bit of mixed media work with my journals and so on. Not really painting, but, you know, still. I do mark making with natural inks and things like that, which again, something else I would like to share with you at one point. But it's that if you love working with paper and you love working with cloth, you know, you put the two together, and you can, it kind of becomes more than the sum of its parts, because you have to respect the nature of both kinds of material and find ways to combine them. And sometimes you have to compromise one for the other, and it's just utterly absorbing, interesting, and endlessly fascinating. And it's kind of my stitch journals really that have got me to the mixed media side of it. The stitch journals began as just a means of holding my stitch pieces. They were just a receptacle, and then they fairly quickly evolved into being something I made myself as part of my creative practice. So there's my oak leaf with its little polypolyester patch. You can just take a couple of back stitches. This I was messing about printing. This is madder ink and walnut ink on the back of here. These are scraps from something. Anyway, leaf shapes. So there we go. Those are my three. I'm going to move all this stuff. Give myself some room. Whoopsie, whoopsie, whoopsie. So I've got the oak, the hazel and the yucca. And I'm going to get my journal in and see what I'm putting where. And I have some words which I've written down, which I'll read to you once I've put the pieces in the journal, which is getting super fat. When you go and watch the journal video, if you haven't seen any of my stitch journals before, you will see why I don't worry that it's getting too fat. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. And that's my bundle book. That's my hexagon. Oh yes, there was some commenting on how I say hexagon. It's applique all over again. Apparently you say hexagon, the other side of the pond. I feel like I've mentioned it already. Did I mention it in Wonky Wednesday? Anyway, sorry, I'm repeating myself. And I say hexagon. I know, it's a video you haven't seen yet, so I have mentioned it, but you've not heard me mention it. So I can't use more than this double page, because then I'd be a page short. If I put things like that in journals face to face like that, I would put something in between, just so that against that, you know, just to protect them a bit. I don't think I am going to put that one in. I might only put this one. Ah, do you know what? I had a thought. I'm going to stitch this to here, leave the top open, so it's a pocket, and put that in it. That's what I'm gonna do. Mind you, I say I'm going to stitch that to there. That's going to be tricky stitching down there, but anyway, nothing ventured. So what shall I stitch it with? Some of this thread that I've just thrown to one side. I'm going to get a clip. Yeah, not a giant paper clip, but a clippy clip. And clip some of these out of the way. If you clip a few together, carefully, then they'll stay somewhat out of the way. Right, where's my thread? You could also, if it gets really tricky for you to stitch them in, you could just glue stick them in from now on, you know, your stitch pieces. There's no reason why you can't. Or as I've been doing, just stitch them along this edge where you can get to. But I've now got this bee in my bonnet about making a pocket. Do you know what? I think I'm going to wimp out of the three-sided pocket and just stitch here, here and here, so it's like a tuck spot. Check me out with my journaling jargon. A tuck spot, so if I stitch it there and there, and then I can even have it so you can see the little eyelet. Giant paper clip. I had one. There it is. I'm going to turn it this way around, and I need to go put my giant paper clip along the bottom. Again, I could glue it, I suppose, since I seem to be doing a lot of gluing today, but now I'm not going to put the giant paper clip over the leaf onto one side, because it will put a lot of pressure on it and it might then splinter. Just because I said you have to be accepting of them breaking doesn't mean that you can't be careful. Making a pocket. Right. I'm going to come up from the back of the bit. No, I'm just going to come through the back. I'm going in about 1/4 of an inch. Again, here, if you were worried about your holes, you can do the same thing that we did with the eyelet stitch in the eucalyptus. Make sure you're only stitching it to one page, Catherine, and make yourself a little guide hole. That'll hold well enough. I'm hoping I can get away with running stitching without it tearing. We'll see. Again, I'm going to do that motion of pulling it the way it's going and not up towards me. Seems to be working okay, except for I've trapped something there I don't want. I don't know why I was so excited about thinking about making a pocket. You know, it's not exactly, it's not rocket science, it's pocket science, sorry. But you know, sometimes you get those little, tiny little flashes of something that comes from somewhere, inspiration or whatever. And it's almost like it wasn't you that came up with it, and you're pleased with it, like as if someone else had come up with it. I'm actually going to stab stitch. I don't know if there's more polyester, no, polyfiller on that, but I can just line myself up on the edge of the page really, so I don't really need to be bothering with the guide hole. Now I've gone wonky, so maybe I should have been. Do you know what I mean about those ideas things? Well, there's an expression in it that we say in England, so sometimes I even impress myself. It doesn't take much to impress me. Right, I'm to the corner, now I have to turn. I'm just going to go as far as I can. It might be easy to do it this way actually. Along the bottom. If I can't go right to the end, then I can't go right to the end. I'm going to do guide holes. I hope you can see if you need to. Oops, come on. if you wanted to do a lot of stitching on a piece of paper or papers, you can just punch all your holes in advance just with an empty needle or the very... what I've done now. Oh dear. Dear. You know, you can just punch yourself a whole line of holes all at once and then just go through them. You remember those lacing cards that I used to have? I had them when I was little to teach children how to sew. So without a needle, they're pre-punched cards with, and you'd go through them with something that looks like a shoelace. So you could just punch holes wherever you thought you wanted your stitches to be in your bit of paper, and then just sit and do that. So that would be such a mindful thing to do. Fancy doing that now. I think I might need some mindfulness later because I've been watching the Euros football, soccer championships. I'm not a huge follower of football generally, you know, I don't watch the sort of club football. Again, I'm talking about soccer. The same with the rugby really, I don't watch all the rugby, but I do like to watch the World Cup and the Six Nations in the rugby, and I like to watch the World Cup and the Euros. And of course today yesterday England played for you. I'm actually recording this on Sunday. So for me, that's this evening's. I hesitate to use the word entertainment because I don't find it entertaining at all. I get so stressed. I don't know why. It's only a game. And I know that Machteld, who I mentioned earlier, is also similar to me. She doesn't watch football regularly, but she likes to watch the major tournaments. And she's Dutch, so she's supporting the Netherlands. There was a scenario where England and the Netherlands... Oh, I've done it again. It's because of the football stressing me out thinking about the football. There was a scenario where England and the Netherlands might have played each other, but it didn't work out that way, luckily, because as many of you know, my partner's also Dutch and also likes watching the football. Although, I think in the past England and the Netherlands must have played and we've managed to not fall out. I'm pretty sure the Netherlands have won every time. England are not that great. When I was born in 1965, a year later, England won the World Cup in 1966. So I was 1 year old. My mother, who is a keen football fan her whole life, she always supported Blackpool, which was where she grew up, when she was born in Yorkshire. Blackpool's in Lancashire. And Stanley Matthews played, a very old footballer. And but also she supported Manchester United, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, even if you're not British or English. I think Manchester United is one of the few football clubs that has more supporters who have never been to Manchester or never been to the city where they're based than any other. But anyway, my mother was a proper Man U fan, used to go on the train with her brother, just deciding what to do with the last bit of my pocket, to Old Trafford to watch them. And so anyway, she was very, very keen to watch the World Cup final, England against Germany, 1966, at Wembley, which is in London. And I was 1 and a baby and, liable to disturb her by crying, so I got packed off to my grandmother's for the day. My mum watched it, and yes, England famously won. So I'm now 59, that was 58 years ago, and that's the last time England's won anything at all. In 1996, the Euro tournament, which was at Wembley again, or in England again, it was at all kinds of football grounds in England, which was 30 years after England won the World Cup. The whole country thought that it would be very poetic and apt if we won that, 30 years after, but that didn't happen. And that was no thanks to Gareth Southgate bobbling a penalty along the ground, because it went to penalties, of course it did. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just tune out. But Gareth Southgate is now the England manager. And every time I see his face, he seems like a very nice chap. But every time I see his face, I just think to myself, Gareth, You were a defender. Why did you insist on taking that penalty? And having taken it, why didn't you just larrup it? That's an English word for kick it really hard into the back of the net. Anyway, so football. Finish with football. There's my leaf in my book. Here's my eucalyptus, which I'm going to leave. Sorry, like that. I like that now. You see, I had no plan, and now I like it. And that's often when I have no plan, I like it. If I have a plan, I don't always like it. I think when you have a plan, you have a preconceived idea that the work has to match exactly. And if it doesn't, you're disappointed. So if you work without a plan, that doesn't happen. Just a random thought. Okay, so we are the 1st of July. Yes. Because it's the 30th of June for me today, and 30 days have September, April, June, November. Yeah, it's the 1st of July. Wow. So the 1st of the 7th, 2024. Now I could either sign it on my pocket or somewhere else. I'll sign it on my pocket. K3N Kiss. And here are my words which I have to write on the facing page from Mary Oliver, and it's the opening lines of a poem by Mary Oliver, American poet, no longer with us, one of my favourites, called Song for Autumn. Interesting that she used the word autumn. I thought you all called it fall. You'll tell me. And it reads, "Don't you imagine the leaves dream now how comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of the air?" So that's what I'm going to write in my book. You can look up the rest. I can't recite it all to you because of copyright. Don't you imagine the leaves dream now how comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of the air. I'm going to write over here because it's easier. Nothingness of the air. And I shall credit her, Mary Oliver. There we go. Get my clippy clip off. So that's my page for week 27, aren't we? Stitching with leaves. So I've got a wax leaf and a dried euca leaf. I showed you the oak leaf. That will go somewhere. I'll find a place for it. And I hope you have fun with it and don't be afraid to experiment. And, you know, maybe do a few and just pick your favourites to put in your journal and make the rest into cards or something else. Look out for the non-applique applique on Wonky Wednesday if you're interested in that. And as always, thank you so much for watching and for being here and bringing me such joy. And I look forward to you joining me next time for more Cloth Tales. Bye bye.